How is this still going on? This verse been going for way too long. If you ain't blind, you can see that this is wrong. And I won't comply. Not me, no way. I may be.
Good morning, everyone. Lots going on. As usual, we've got people do care about racism. Maybe not. We'll see. Speech, Facebook spying on your messenger messages. Interesting. And censorship, C11 and more. We've got updates on C11. Digital currency. Yeah, they're working on digital currency. Of course, they're working on digital currency. This is just more misinformation to muddy the waters. 15 workers, 50 workers. Who's working on digital currency? Bank of Canada. PPC turns 4 years old. So happy birthday to the PPC and Maxime Bernier. And Charles's pen tantrum, because this seems to be a meme. This is apparently the second tantrum he's had about a pen in the last week. So we've got to cover the WEF king, don't we? And so let's get into it. There's lots to get into. First, if you want to support the show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. You can check out the forums. They're free. You can do a one-time payment or a monthly subscription. You can check out my book, or you can check out the merch, and you can sign up for Kitchen Table Talks, which will return on Sunday at 1 o'clock. And you can click this link here if you're interested in supporting the show and you shop at Amazon, but you don't want to send me money directly. That's cool. If you want to if you want to check out locals and links that I put up on locals, that's cool. And if you want to see all the links I'm using to build the show, then check out CanadaReport.co. I've got all sorts of crazy properties online. It's weird. Marty put this tweet out, and this is a theme or like a viral meme that people are putting out. Remember the I am Canadian kind of thing? He says, I'm a 55-year-old Canadian. I'm married, father to 4, university educated, and perfectly bilingual. I'm an engineer solving problems for 35 years. I'm a volunteer hockey coach and an avid outdoorsman. According to Trudeau, I'm an extremist who needs to be dealt with. Right? Here's another one. Miss Fee, she says, I'm a 49-year-old Canadian, married for 24 years and a mother of 2. I volunteered in my children's school for 11 years. My husband and I own a small business, pay our taxes, and employ other Canadians. According to Trudeau, I have unacceptable views and I shouldn't be tolerated. So it's kind of like fill in the blanks, right? Like I'm a blank. This is my contribution to Canada. I'm a citizen and I do what I do. And because I disagree with Trudeau about what I want to do with my body, he thinks that I'm an extremist and needs to be dealt with. And that's interesting, right? I think it's very interesting. I think it's very effective, very grassroots. The hashtag Trudeau must go is usually included, and it was trending yesterday when this was happening. And so there's all sorts of these all over the internet, all over Twitter anyway. And I thought, man, what an effective protest. Very interesting stuff. It kind of reminded me of the Simpsons protest, but this one's a little bit more effective. Speech, they're trying to regulate speech, and there's all sorts of problems with that. I think obvious problems, but we'll go through it. Blacklock's reporters reporting ex-CRTC commissioner testifies on C11. Internet regulation bill is a power grab over human communication by the feds. Quote, it deserves our disdain. So yeah, former people who used to work in the CRTC and communication are saying this is a bad idea. Let's not do this. And here, this is a Senate hearing because C11 did pass the House and it's now being examined in the Senate, of course. And here in the exchange in the House, these guys say that the tweet says Global Affairs confirms the U.S. is sending a signal that it may retaliate against other sectors of the Canadian economy if Bill C11 is enacted. A lot of this video is interesting to watch. This guy says, we don't think they will retaliate. They never have, so we don't think they will. That's basically what he says. He says it almost exact. Hold on a second. That's exactly what he says pretty much. Now, I don't believe this necessarily to be the case, what he's saying here, because he lays out that retaliatory measures have been discussed. And this is 2:51 in the video, and the video is about 5 minutes long. So he uses half the video to discuss how that kind of stuff was put on the table. Here he says, we don't think that'll happen because they've never done it before. In 25, 30 years, never done it before. So why would they do it now? I don't think in 25, 30 years, anybody's proposed to do the censorship that they're looking at doing now. No. And I remember 25, 30 years ago. Which is crazy. You get to a certain age and my goodness, when the hockey players start looking young, scary. Okay, here we go.
Thus far. In terms of risk to other sectors, again, I wouldn't want to prejudge that this effort is going to lead to any kind of retaliatory outcome. Indeed, the type of retaliation that's been discussed in some of in this overall review is something that we don't feel will necessarily come to fruition. When you look at our ability to engage with the U.S. on these matters for the last 25, 30 years, the U.S. has never invoked any kind of retaliatory response to Canada's cultural policy programs, and we don't see that Bill C-11 will necessarily lead to that either. But in the meantime, there are a number.
So they're not worried. And so they're telling the Senate, don't be worried about it. It's fine. They're probably not going to do anything. The U.S. has never done anything before. I think that, right? I think it's probably a good bet to say they've never done it. So past behavior is a good indicator of future behavior. Sure. But also, Canada's never passed a bill that regulates the internet before, as far as I understand it. Handing over the internet for regulation to the CRTC, which is supposed to be arm's length, but they're very ineffective. And Michael Geist is going to illustrate how ineffective the CRTC is. But will the United States take umbrage with that enough to use the leverage in the USMCA? I don't know. Here's Michael Geist, and he says, short thread on the Global Affairs Justice appearance before Senate Committee on Bill C-11. This is a more robust look at this than what I just gave you. Global Affairs says, quote, we took agreements into account, hence reality, risk that Bill C-11 violates Article 14.5, 14.10, and 19.4 of the USMCA, or CUSMA, because Chrystia Freeland is ridiculous. Potential for billions in tariff retaliation. Global Affairs asked about the risk of tariff retaliation under USMCA. Officials respond that it believes the bill is consistent with the trade agreement, acknowledges the U.S. has raised issues with the bill, describes the discussion as amicable. They brought it up in a friendly way. Hey guys, don't do that. Punch on the arm. Senator, and they list them, all ask about Bill C-11 compliance with the USMCA, get nothing but generalities back from department official, so pointless that they move on. The chair moves on, discouraging that officials come to committee with so little substance, so they're not given anything to actually use to make their decision, he's saying. Justice officials at Heritage describe charter statement for Bill C-11, can't disclose actual advice given to government, says the CRTC is bound by charter and freedom of expression, doesn't acknowledge CRTC and Radio Canada decision did not address charter or freedom of expression at all. Senators chair, it looks like the chair asks justice officials about the CRTC Radio Canada ruling, which got into content regulation. Officials say the case is before the courts, so they can't say much. Oh man, just darn shucks, eh? Emphasizes that the regs would apply to platforms. Reality is it can set regulations on how user content is presented. Really? They're really doing this, and it's already in the Senate, and they don't want the senators to understand how bad this is going to be because they desperately want to pass it. And all of the signals look like it's going to pass. So, but I thought that last time, and I was unbelievably shocked when the Senate sent it back last time. So are they going to send it back again? I don't know, but the House keeps passing it, and they've got till 2025 to keep pushing and pressuring and changing people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, well, it's very interesting. Michael Geist continues, takeaway from Global Affairs and justice officials before Senate Committee on BC-11 is now as unserious as it all seems. Lots of comments on why they can't say or don't know or don't worry about it. How can legislation be effectively reviewed when officials aren't forthcoming? And they're not forthcoming because if they were forthcoming, nobody would allow them to continue what they're doing. But because they're being sneaky about it, people are giving them the benefit of the doubt and allowing them to continue. Michael Geist continues, he says, the same CRTC that Pablo Rodriguez wants to oversee regulation of user content online via Bill C-11 keeps its voting secret, delays decisions for months, and misled MPs on content regulation. It shouldn't require an ATIP to find out how commissioners voted. And ATIP is a Freedom of Information, I believe. So yeah, it's pretty wild what's going on with the CRTC and how little information is being offered for the senators to who want to explore this. They don't want to explore this, not really. There's some maybe, but is it enough? Is it a majority who are interested in what's really going on rather than the government line of, don't worry about it, we're going to build that plane on the way down, or we're going to crash this one or the other. Jay Kura says, global news, your trusted source for propaganda. Imagine on the left their published vision and values. Imagine on the right, put into practice. So the visions on the left, our global news vision, our vision is to reflect Canadians and our diverse communities, to be a credible, trustworthy, essential news source that Canadians turn to first, and to be news leaders and innovators. Our global news values, collaborative, honest, trustworthy, innovative, adaptable, unique, and factual. And Anthony Koch says, at press conference today on combating Justin Trudeau's inflation, David Akin told me to tell the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, to go F himself. Later, he erupted in a yelling spasm to try and prevent Mr. Poilievre from even beginning his press conference. And we'll revisit this, because here's another angle, and it zooms in on Akin. He's not hiding this. This was totally calculated, 100% for clicks, etc. I hope he's embarrassed. I wonder if he got paid well for that, because somebody probably told him to do that. He's not doing this by accident. This is 100% calculated, in my opinion. Dean says, this video is devastating for global news and Dave Akin, by far the most despicable press gallery behavior ever recorded. No wonder he was told to quickly apologize. Here we go again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate your presence here today. Before I begin, let me just say that thank you very much. I'm being heckled here by thank you very much for your congratulations. Thank you very much for your questions. I'm going to begin my remarks now.
But will you take some questions afterwards?
Justin Trudeau is out of touch, and Canadians are out of money. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. $500 billion of inflationary deficits have bid up the cost of the goods we buy and the interest that Canadians pay. The cost for workers and businesses.
So I'll stop it there. We've seen the video before, but it's egregious. He knows it. Akin knows it. And it's unbelievable. This kind of speech is okay. If this was Kean doing this, security would have tackled him. He wouldn't have been able to continue talking and interrupting, et cetera, et cetera. Tackled him. Security would have made very clear that his presence was no longer tolerable, let's just say. And I've seen them do that to Kean, because the prime minister doesn't like to answer questions he doesn't like, I guess. And so they do physically intimidate journalists they don't like in Canada. It's wild. It's absolutely incredible what's happening here. Vivian says, someone out there should write a serious piece about the erosion of public trust in Canadian media. The Akin incident has focused everyone's attention. It's a really serious issue and has developed in Canada and elsewhere over years. I think it's worse in Canada than many other countries. Why? Courageous Knight says, population apathy. In the USA, there's a clear divide between right and wrong. And if you trounce freedom, American people will stand up and call you what you are. Whereas in Canada, I saw freedom defenders thanking David Akin for his apology, even though it's not genuine. Right. He did that on purpose. He wasn't apologizing. He didn't apologize except for to maintain maybe access to the press gallery to say, I won't do that again. So pretty wild, right? And they want to stop a show like this or Rebel News, but people who are behaving that way, that's just fine with Justin Trudeau and the powers that be. They won't stop that. They won't say that's aggressive or anything like that. That's holding a conservative to account. It doesn't matter. Pierre Poilievre, I had a few tabs showing that Pierre Poilievre was being called out for attacking journalists on his first day, when clearly this was supposed to be a provocation, which Pierre didn't fall for. And the whole thing was manufactured outrage by paid for people, paid for bot accounts, boosted by bot accounts. I don't know. But it's such an interesting thing to watch. And the mainstream media, the top line media, they're not interested in covering the down and dirty bits and pieces of the politics that Canadians are experiencing every day, and all the way down to school board elections. And we're going to look at Dr. Neely today. Holy smoke, roadies. And some of my school board election, if you're interested in that, you should follow me at Trustee Mark P. Holy smoke. Holy smoke. Anyway, that's an aside from the show, but holy smoke. Right? And it's crazy that nobody really wants to talk about it from the mainstream media, but they really don't. They really don't. And the longer this goes on, the more it gets normalized, and then it becomes part of culture. And that's not great, because the culture's already changed drastically from when I was a kid. And that's not great, because this new Canadian culture is very interesting, because it's driven by a victimhood mentality that I just didn't associate with Canada. And now it seems ubiquitous everywhere. And it's wild. It's absolutely incredible. Anyway, let's talk about governance. Pierre Poilievre is planning to move into the publicly funded, the residence Stoneway residence. And that's where the leader of the official opposition lives, as he should. I mean, he's probably going to be the leader for a while. So why delay moving in? If you don't move in, it seems like you're not really, taking the party over, et cetera, et cetera. Although Scheer and O'Toole didn't live there very long, seemed kind of temporary. Scheer being in Poilievre's cabinet really still bugs me. I mean, like, it should bug you. It should bug me. It does bug me. But it's interesting that it's so in your face, because he was so in with the milk people. He won that crooked race with Bernier. What message does that send? Pierre Poilievre says Trudeau would rather import 130,000 barrels of overseas oil a day from places like Saudi Arabia than make more energy here in Canada. Conservatives will support clean, ethical energy right here at home and stop importing oil from overseas within 5 years. They're going to try and invert this and try and claim that they're being the environmentally friendly ones by shutting down pipelines, and Mr. Poilievre is trying to be irresponsible by, drilling Canadian oil. It's very interesting how the propaganda works. It's really interesting because it's basically like, what Dave Aiken was trying to do to Pierre Poilievre was assert dominance and take over the conversation, take over the press, the presser, etc. And he failed, but he was trying to do that, and he was trying to do that to provoke. And when the radical leftists come at you, what they do is they misrepresent your argument in a way that it frames your argument as obviously the wrong one, and it frames them as the virtuous ones. And then they all pile on to claim victimhood over their virtuousness and your lack of virtue, often without actually dealing with the thing that you actually said. You always deal with the thing that they said you said. It's so interesting. And if you fixate on the thing that you said, and you say, listen, you're not talking about anything that I said. What I said was this, and you should read what I wrote or whatever. Focus on the thing that you actually said and don't engage with the thing that they say that you said. Do you see? Maybe not. I don't know. But it's so interesting how the attacks work and how consistently they follow the same pattern. They're going to misrepresent and then attack based on the misrepresentation. Crazy. Melissa Lantsman. So I said, Andrew Scheer is prominent in Pierre Poilievre's cabinet, Pierre Poilievre's government structure, and so is Melissa Lantsman. And Melissa Lantsman is she's been outspoken about a whole bunch of stuff, very clearly outspoken. And Maxime Bernier says this is Melissa Lantsman, Poilievre's new deputy leader. And in an interview 2 years ago, before she was elected as an MP, she says she supports socialist universal basic income and praises the Liberals for their COVID spending programs. Here's Melissa Lantsman in her own words.
Political parties now saying, Melissa, that they want to have this as a steady thing, the minimum income.
Well, you know what? I actually do somewhat agree with that. And there's a conservative position on this. The universal income benefit, the thing that you're talking about, where you're giving people a living wage, that's going to come. And it could be that by a different name.
Doesn't sound very conservative to me, Melissa.
I actually think conservatives can own this because you know what it does do? It does take government out of the mix of a bunch of means-tested programs thrown out of Ottawa by a bunch of bureaucrats and gives everybody that thing that they need to get back to work. And we put that onto people.
It doesn't work, though. I mean, like, we've seen what the CEWS coups did, right? It encouraged people to not work and it cost a lot of money. And printing money to pay people to stay at home and get money and not work will not help them get back to work, as far as I understand the psychology of people. You're going to pay me to stay at home, or I could go to work to get paid the same. That's a tough one. That's really tough. I'm just going to sit here while I think about that. You're going to pay me while I sit here and think about it? Wonderful. So, right? I mean, this will incentivize people to not work. So Melissa Lantsman believes in UBI. Now, that's an old interview. Maybe she's changed her tune. Maybe she's decided that will support something else. But there are concerns with Mr. Poilievre's Conservative Party, despite the buzz and the rhetoric, right? The buzz and the everybody really, really liking the things that he's saying. There are things that he's saying with his actions that are speaking very loudly that the crowd is ignoring. And it's interesting. It's interesting to watch, right? Because people want that hope. They want that hope, and they're willing to forgive a lot for that hope. It's very interesting. CBC is reporting Ottawa cop resigns after criminal charges in tow truck kickback scheme state. So all of the people, remember a while ago when there was a big arrest in Toronto, and I think there was 4 or 5 police officers in Toronto who owned an app that was connected to a police radio, and the police radio would radio in about accidents. And so the app would update the tow truck to the most up-to-date police radio accidents. And it was great. Everybody was making all sorts of money, but it was really illegal. I believe it was really illegal, conflict of interest, all sorts of stuff. They also owned a rental car company, which, I mean, you're serving your customers. You might as well. Oh, you've got to do an accident. Here's the tow truck. Here, we'll take you to a rental car place. It seems that they're taking care of you, but maybe they're taking advantage of their position, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, they've not been able to do that, but the same thing was happening in Ottawa, and the charges were corruption originally, and then it got downgraded to something that is not corruption, withdrawn or stayed. 3 civilians were also charged in the plot, yet in the end, all but one of the criminal charges laid against the entire group were either withdrawn or stayed. Right? So, and these guys, this guy's name is Assad, but there were 2 other cops, Kevin Putinsky and Andrew Chronopoulos. I think I accidentally got both of those right. Nailed it. Were charged with corruption-related offenses by the RCMP in 2020. But by the end of the whole thing, only 1 criminal charge and everything. Basically, they surrendered their badges to and agreed not to be officers anymore. So wild stuff. And how do you deal with this kind of level of corruption, rot in the system? I mean, from the RCMP down to local police forces after watching the Freedom Convoy, et cetera, what kind of madness are we tolerating in Canada? It's crazy. Here's the central bank digital currency, CBDC, and this is Tom Quiggin, and he's citing a National Post article that says, at the Bank of Canada, a small team is hard at work on digital currency technology. So a small team is hard at work at enslaving Canadians with digital currency money. Ooh, fun. I mean, I always really enjoyed Canadian paper money. I like the $2 bill. I like the $5 bill. I like the old $10 bill when they were kind of like Monopoly money, right? And they kind of fabric-y, and I loved that money when I was a kid. And I mean, maybe that's because I was a kid in the 80s and money had a special sheen to it back then. But now money is like, it's such a different thing, and people don't interact with it as much. It's very magic money now, and people are really used to it. And I've used as an anecdote before on my show that I remember the transition from checkbooks at the grocery store to debit cards at the grocery store, and it was seamless and took like 10 seconds. It took no time at all. So if they get this technology working, even if people scream, people like Catherine Austin Fitts and people who are saying this is a tool that will work with your phone to enslave you, people will be like, oh yeah, but you can pay with your phone now, and it's so easy. And how do you fight against that? Because you can say to Amazing Polly, you make so much sense, I understand what you're saying, and still make no changes, right? People do. People look at that and say, oh, I'm fully aware of what's happening. I don't think fully aware. But it's wild. People will just do what they've always done. And if the cell phone is super addictive, super addictive, gives you likes and all sorts of dopamine hits, and like the cell phone as we see it now. And there's no regulation on that at all, on apps or anything like that. And I'm not saying that we should regulate those things necessarily, but maybe have an idea of what it's doing to the brains of people, et cetera. I have no idea, but it seems like people are enslaved to their phones to a degree. I don't know. It's everybody. It's not just, your partner or your kids or your parents or anything like that. I think it's everybody. There's nobody who's not impacted by what's happening in the world. And it's happening and picking up speed, it seems. And that's incredible too. Maxime Bernier, let's move into, I guess this is all politics, isn't it? 4 years ago today, he says, I'm awfully proud of what we've accomplished. Happy birthday, People's Party of Canada. And he shared a CP24 article talking about the launch of the PPC 4 years ago on CP24. So that's pretty cool. Well done, 4 years. And I mean, what a fight. And I said yesterday on my show, I don't know I don't know how to do it better. I don't know what the magic sauce was for Mr. Poilievre in putting together a national campaign that resonated with Canadians the way he did. And in comparison, Maxime Bernier has scrapped out every year, fighting censorship, fighting arrest, fighting denunciation, mischaracterization, all sorts of just unbelievable odds. And he's still fighting. And so good for him. It seems like you're shouting into a hurricane sometimes. Me too. But I can tell you people appreciate it, even to have the counterpoint, even to push the envelope to make sure that people understand that these are reasonable, sensible policies that are on the table. In a sane world, Mr. Bernier and his party would be making up a much larger proportion of our government. It's unbelievable what's going on. It really is. My jaw is every day. I pick it up off the floor and then it just, poof, nothing you can do. Laurie Goldstein says, in-house research done by the RCMP says that only 35% of Canadians surveyed says they trust the national leadership of Commissioner Brenda Lucki. Only 51% rate the Mounties as an honest police force, according to Minding Ottawa. Yeah. I'm not really. If somebody asked, if there was a crime, hypothetically, in Canada that was a big crime that got national attention, again, hypothetically, I would not be confident if the Mounties were in charge of investigating it. There was no arrests in the gas link. There was a gas link attack where there was a group of 20 people who came with machetes and they did all sorts of vandalizations and damage, millions of dollars in damage, all sorts of stuff, and absolutely no arrests at all. And that people are focused on Diagolon. There's absolutely no credibility in this police force. 35%, that's way higher than I expected it to be. Way higher. Holy smoke. Rob Moore says, Correctional Services Canada is now victim blaming Brenda Davis, whose 16-year-old sister was shot and killed by a man on parole at the time of her murder. This killer was again granted parole in 2016, but CSC had lost contact with him, and he remains unlawfully at large. Yet his rights are a priority over hers. This individual is a murderer who clearly should not have been paroled in the first place. While the Prime Minister has an armed security detail at his beck and call, regular Canadians depend on his government's departments to keep them safe. The criminal justice system has never been more backwards. I knew Brenda's father, Ron Davis, since he was a councillor here in Riverview. His tireless advocacy for victims' rights inspired changes to the parole system under the Harper government. But for the last 7 years, the federal government has been eroding our justice system, and Canadians are feeling the consequences. Their ideological policies will not keep our communities safe. How many times do the police need to catch a murderer and have him convicted before there's a real justice served? Or are these Liberals content with the revolving door of the criminal justice system? The Liberal government needs to stop coddling killers and start stepping up for victims. It's time for accountability. Yeah, this is a Conservative MP. This is strong language coming from Conservative MPs. So, is this a tone change from them? We'll see. We'll see. While Andrew Scheer and Melissa Lanceman are leader and House leader, or deputy leader and House leader, I'm very, very hesitant. And Baird is probably prominent as well. We'll check out the shadow cabinet, right? When the shadow cabinet gets dropped, we'll check that out too and see if there's anybody with WEF connections, right? And I hope not, right? And Mr. Poilievre, I'm sure, will make sure not, as he said that he would do that. If there are WEF connections, what then? But let's cross that bridge when we get to it. Let's not borrow trouble. Let's talk about race. Christine is a educator in Guelph, and she found my article that I showed you yesterday. And the article, fundamentally, I put forward, I want all students valued by the Upper Grand District School Board, and I want the adults to set a good example. And Christine misrepresents my argument and says, as an Upper Grand District School Board parent and an educator, the possibility of a trustee who engages in the denial of anti-Black racism is very alarming. I worked in the Upper Grand District School Board. I was a youth care worker in the Upper Grand District School Board. And I would love to be made aware and informed how many incidents of anti-Black racism from 2018 to 2022. How many? Because I can tell you that they don't have those numbers. Nothing was tracked. They don't have any numbers like that. And so this person is trying to create a problem where no data exists to back up her claim. Really interesting. And it misrepresents my argument. My argument is that I want all students treated the same as the board states will be the case in their own policies. I want the board to abide by their own policies. And so, not understanding what anti-Black racism is, please explain it to me and give me examples from the board. Thank you. Looking forward to it. But it's very interesting because this is an example of what I was talking about, misrepresenting the argument. She didn't read my article. She didn't read what I wrote. And instead of attacking the article at its core and attacking the ideas in the article, she misrepresents it and attacks that. Linda Busuttil as well, she's running for a councillor in Guelph, ignores the content of the article and thanks people for highlighting my social media posts. Oh, this guy's, or maybe this person hasn't, but Twitter doesn't want us to see that. That's fine. We'll move on. But it's very interesting when people are trying to misrepresent what's going on in order to prove their point. But they're not arguing about what I wrote. They're arguing about a fiction that they've created. It's incredible. Ontario Education Minister orders school board to honor the Queen. Okay, so this is just another example of them trying to undermine our history in Canada. And our history matters. Our history counts. Okay, it does. Public school teachers in York Region are being told to avoid any memorials or tributes to Queen Elizabeth II in classrooms because the subject matter might be very triggering to some students, a policy that the Ford government wants to see scrapped immediately. On September 9th, one day after the royal family announced the death of Queen Elizabeth II, the York Regional District School Board sent a memo to schools instructing them on how to handle students and staff inquiries about the monarch's passing. The memo reminded teachers that schools should remain neutral environments and that discussions surrounding the Queen's death are not encouraged because it could remind students of personal losses they may have experienced. We request that all school staff please refrain from developing tributes or activities to memorialize the death of the Queen, as well as displaying objects associated with the Queen for the purposes of memorializing, the memo reads. For some, the death of the Queen is very triggering. Schools were also instructed to not play God Save the Queen or to live stream events related to the funeral and to offer students a neutral space to have a break from potentially triggering media exposure. In a stern statement, Education Minister Stephen Lecce, I don't know, ordered the school board to overturn the policy and honor the Queen on the date of her funeral. We've made clear our direction that all schools are to recognize the profound impact of Queen Elizabeth II's lifelong and unwavering devotion to public service, Lecce said in a statement to Global News. I have directed this board to implement the province's expectation, honor the Queen on the date of her funeral, and enrich students with a strong understanding of the values and enduring legacy of Canada's constitutional democracy. So, very interesting, but it's this kind of nonsense that propagates removal of our history, and it's unacceptable. Here's Cauldron Pool, and he says, there are no bad reviews, only racism. So here's the racist backlash to Hal Bailey's The Little Mermaid is out of control. I don't know if this has been released yet or not. I saw there was a Matt Walsh joke about this yesterday. Here's another one. So the movie's not bad. Obviously, it's racist people who are stacking the deck against the movie, obviously. The Rings of Power is suffering a racist backlash for casting actors of color, but Tolkien's work has always attracted white supremacists. Right, yeah, it's the white supremacists who are to blame for this Rings of Power debacle that's not a very good movie or show or whatever it is. I haven't watched it. I don't know. And Mark Ruffalo, I watched the trailer for She-Hulk and it looked terrible. It looked absolutely terrible. And it looked like a vehicle just to push ideological ideas. And it did not look like something I wanted to watch at all, period. But of course, according to Mark Ruffalo, that's alt-right, white supremacy, racism, obviously. Mark Ruffalo shares argument that viewers who dislike She-Hulk are racist and sexist. I didn't even watch it and I disliked it. Screen Rant's article, She-Hulk's review bombing proves IMDb's biggest rating problem, claims that the show is receiving bad reviews on the movie database due to the fact that the series is female-led. See, I don't think that's true. Here's Miss Marvel as well. Because female-led, Xena, have you seen Xena? That was a great show, right? Female-led, bam, no problem. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There was no problem because the show itself was entertaining as all get out, and it wasn't trying to shove ideology down your throat. Yes, it was. I take that back. It was the third season was really, really shoving ideology down your throat. It was shoving ideology down your throat, but it was palatable because it was wrapped in a good story. These people hate the source material. That's the reason all of these things are garbage. It's the same reason that Star Wars sucked. That's not my theory. That's this guy's theory. There's a YouTube video that says why modern movies sucks. Why modern movies suck. That's harder to say than you think. They hate their own source material, right? They hate Tolkien. They hate the people who came up with Star Wars. They don't understand the structure of story fundamentally, right? Well, maybe they understand the structure of story, but they hate the source so much that and they want it burned down. So they reimagine it as their own woke version of whatever. And a woke superhero just isn't getting read. It's just not. It's just not. They made Superman gay, and then they were surprised when teenage kids didn't want to read it. That's wild. It's not a mystery. It's not a mystery why they're not interested in it, right? Like, holy smoke. Have you looked at a comic book? Any comic book? Any comic book's female characters? What audience is the comic book aimed at? Hello. Okay. I mean, really, you have to know your audience, man. If you make a comic book that's not interesting story-wise and doesn't have anything visually to entertain the target demographic, the comic book's not going to be well read. I'm sorry. These are the rules. I don't make them. The agenda, TVO says, let's talk about elections. The lack of obvious liberal savior combined with the party's clearly being in no hurry to select its next leaders suggests liberals could be open to more creative solution to their problems. Anybody want a liberal party? Bargain basement prices? But it's even better because they're suggesting that Mike Schreiner, the American Green leader living in Guelph, he's an American. He's a Canadian citizen, but he was born in the United States. He should be the liberal leader. I say, do it. Go ahead. You could get one seat in the whole province. You've already done it. Yay! Take that Liberal Party to one. Hashtag Mike for liberal leader. I think it's so funny. I mean, who thought of that? You know what we could do? You see this guy who's never got more than one seat. Goodness me. Who's advising these people? Okay. You should look for somebody popular who's talking about things that people like and then use that as a starting point for your political planks, etc. No, you have to align with the insane Liberal Party in order to be the leader. You can't take the party and make it into something else. Here's the school board election, school board trustee election. And this person, I guess, created a QR code that they have been attaching to Dr. Neely's campaign flyers her signs, her actual in-person signs. And apparently Dr. Neely is on Twitter with a burner account and looking for people because this guy's blocked her. He says, I'm famous. Now I know Dr. Neely searches her own name on a burner account. Because she's taken screenshots of this guy putting the QR codes. She says, local anti-vaxxer sticking QR code to my election sign that goes to a nasty Twitter account. This is targeted vandalism by a local. Report to Ottawa Police, report to Twitter. If anyone sees such thing around town, remove what's been attached to my sign and let me know. And so she's talking about wanting to make a quick thread to capture this week in Ontario's most unhinged COVID grifter. Very interesting stuff. And I just think this is round the bend crazy. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in a school board election. Even Ottawa, right? Toronto school board elections have never been this jaw-dropping. It's like you're in a washing machine and you're in the middle and an insane amount of things are happening and they fly by your face. And just as you sit there and go, that's unbelievable. Is that real? Are you kidding? Another crazy thing that is just as unbelievable, just as unlikely, but just as real, seemingly sitting in front of you. And you're like, I certainly look at things and react in such a way with incredulity. I can't believe it. I sit there and I think, holy cow, this really is happening. Here's your media, by the way. CTV News. Let's talk about the Queen. King Charles III and his siblings, Prince William and Harry, walked behind the Queen's coffin during a procession to Westminster Hall. CTV Toronto says, yowza. So, don't trust the media. I'm pretty sure that King Charles is their father, CTV, but, I don't know. So here is another thing that's absolutely insane. There is a lineup, and they call a lineup a queue in England. I got in trouble in Wales once because somebody asked me if I was in the queue, and I had no idea what they were talking about. I was standing in line. Yes, I was in the queue. And I had a sword. I was 8 or something, 10 maybe. And I had a sword and a candy. And I was waiting to pay for said sword and candy, and I had like a fanny pack on. And this woman comes up to me, and she's Welsh and trying to speak English. And we were in Llandudno. You can't spell it. Lland, and it doesn't matter. Very, very Welsh place. And I think on the side of a mountain called Snaefell. Anyway, again, very specific. But I'm standing in this line. This woman comes up to me and says, "In the queue." And I was like, "What?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm in the line." But she didn't understand what I said, and I didn't understand what she said. And my mom intervened. And then the lady ended up buying me my stuff. So whatever. It was all good. It worked out. You in the queue? Anyway, long story short, you're in the queue. And there's a lineup to go see the Queen's funeral, the Queen's procession. And here's this thread that I thought was hilarious last night before bed. Right, everyone, I need to be serious for a moment because the greatest thing that ever happened is happening right now. I don't particularly care either way about the Queen, but the queue is a triumph of Britishness. It's incredible. Just to be clear, I don't mean the purpose of the queue. I don't mean the outpouring of emotion or collective grief or the event at the end and around the queue or the people in the queue. I mean literally the queue itself. It's like something from Douglas Adams. It is the motherlode of queues. It's art. It is poetry. It is the queue to end all queues. It opened earlier today and is already 2.2 miles long. They will close it if it gets to 5 miles. That's a queue that would take 2 hours to walk at a brisk pace. It is a queue that goes right through the entirety of London. It has toilets and water points and websites just for the queue. You cannot leave the queue. You cannot get into the queue further down. You cannot hold places in the queue where there are wristbands for the queue. Once you join the queue, you can expect to be there for days, but you cannot have a chair and a sleeping bag. There is no sleeping in the queue, for the queue moves constantly and steadily day and night. You will be shuffling along at 0.1 miles per hour for days. There is a YouTube channel, Twitter feed, and Instagram page giving each frequent updates about the queue because the back of the queue naturally keeps moving. To join the queue requires up to the minute knowledge of where the queue is now. The BBC has live coverage of the queue on BBC One and a red button service showing the front bit of the queue. No one in their right mind would join the queue, and yet still they come. Oh, it'll only be until 6 a.m. on Thursday. We can take soup. At the end of the queue is a box. You will walk past the box slowly, but for no more than a minute, and then you will exit into the London drizzle and make your way home. Tell me this isn't the greatest bit of British performance art that has ever happened. I'm giddy with joy. It's fantastic. We are a deeply, deeply mad people with an absolutely unshakable need to join a queue. It's utterly glorious. Are you in the queue? What? Okay. Apologies. Let's talk about Canada. Alberta has proclaimed September 19th a day of mourning. It is not a holiday in Alberta. So there you go. Only federal employees get the day off with pay. Wah, wah. And here's Prince Charles. I'm not actually going to show this. I mean, it's 45 seconds. It's King Charles III, Charles III, I'll say it correctly, having a little bit of a meltdown over a pen that I guess the ink is bleeding everywhere and he gets the date wrong. And it's kind of funny. It's kind of I think the Q thing was better. I'm not going to play this right now, but he gets all upset and he gets all faffed up and he gets up and then Camilla comes down and starts writing in the book. It was very, I said yesterday, it was jarring to see Camilla sit in the Queen's chair. I thought, oh man, that's weird. That's really weird. What are you going to do, I guess? Here is moving into immigration. Here in Newfoundland, I've been talking about the impacts of immigration in Ontario, and the impacts of immigration in Ontario are unevenly felt in big cities like Toronto, Richmond Hill, Brampton, all sorts of GTA localities have been really, really impacted by immigration because there's more services there, all sorts of reasons. There's all sorts of reasons why they've been more impacted, but they are more impacted in Ontario. Now, what's happening in Newfoundland is they're bringing in people, but there aren't any doctors in Newfoundland and there's nowhere to live. Rent is similar, well, not as similar as Ontario, but it is not as easy to find somewhere in a city like St. John's. And so the Premier of Newfoundland says, welcome to the 76 Afghanistan refugees who are calling Newfoundland and Labrador home. We hope you find peace and comfort as you begin to build your new life and in our peaceful province. And Gene says, all while you starve the seniors to death, tax us to death to fund your immigrant policy, you do not have the authority to bring in those in a place and place them in condos with governments paying the bill. Look after who's here. And this person is responding to this. And he says, please explain, Fury, who's the premier of Newfoundland right now, where they are living. There's nowhere in St. John's to live regarding apartments. Where are they getting a doctor? My 92-year-old mom and I need one. So I've been in Newfoundland recently, and I've heard about people having a very difficult time finding a doctor all across the island. And I have family that were just driving more than 3 hours to get to doctor's appointments. And that's wild. I often talk about the mismatch in the messaging that's outside of Canada to immigrants who are looking to come to Canada, and how it's not fair to them. Here's a Jamaican guy talking about the Canadian experience. He says, this video is for immigrants only. Here we go.
This video is for all immigrants who are coming to Canada, who are dreaming of coming to Canada. And they are telling you about all the opportunities and all how great it is. What they are not telling you is how high the cost of living is. Make sure if you are coming to Canada, it's not just you, it's you and 3 other people, and the 3 of you guys can live together, so you can save up a whole heap of money and housing and try living together, and even food. I just go to the supermarket and I have like 2 grocery bags. Just look at knickknacks. As you look, $100. So make sure if you're coming to Canada, don't come alone, and make sure you have a plan with a group of people. It is not what they say it is. Don't be tricked about all these opportunities. People can't live off one income here. It don't make any sense. Just do your reading, find out all the facts, find out from a friend. You understand? It is not a bed of roses. It's all a trick. Trust me. It's safe.
Okay, don't take my word for it. And I love Cool Runnings. I love Cool Running. I love the Jamaican accent. Super fun. But I don't like lying to people about opportunities that abound, and then they get here and they're trapped, and they've used all their money, or they've had this dream, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's disingenuous. I don't like that Canada does that on my behalf. That's not good. I don't like lying to people about things like that. Siobhan says, Ontario's out with the parameters for seniors to be moved from hospitals to long-term care beds away from their communities, up to 70 kilometers in southern Ontario and 150 kilometers in northern Ontario. Hospitals are required to charge $400 a day for those discharged, but won't take those spots. It's very interesting. So basically, in order to free up hospital space, the hospitals are sending people to long-term care anywhere that has an open room within 70 kilometers. And if you say no, then you're charged $400 a day. So most people can't say no because they don't have that money. And so what are you going to do? Free healthcare, yo. Or $400 a day unless you do what I say. Free healthcare. So here's your bill for the ambulance and dental. Free healthcare in Canada. Sure. It's one of those things, man. People are willing to tolerate a lot so they can say, we have free healthcare. We're better than the United States. Oh, I don't know, man. I don't know. The rose-colored glasses have come off our healthcare system, and I think that the people who should have been watching it and making sure that it was doing what it's supposed to do have done a disservice to the taxpayers who paid the bills. And while we've had a crumbling healthcare system with hallway healthcare and all sorts of problems, we've increased ineffective administrators and not increased our capacity or ability to deal with health-related emergencies, as illustrated by COVID-19. Here is National Post talking about lockdowns. Draconian COVID measures were a mistake. Let's not repeat them. This is an opinion piece. So at least people's opinions are starting to talk about how terrible lockdowns were. I'm not going to get into this opinion piece, but I think that lockdowns were obviously more harm than good. And I'm glad that there are people in the media now pushing back. I don't know that it's enough. It doesn't seem to matter. They'll misrepresent the argument and say, this person wants everybody to die. And then, the person says, no, I don't. Actually, what the article said is we shouldn't lock down again. And they say, you want everybody to die. Nope. Maxime Bernier says, as I was saying 2 years ago, when all the country's fake conservatives in Ottawa and provincial capitals were supporting or implementing lockdowns. Matt Strauss is talking about the same report. There was a report released talking about the impact of lockdowns, and that's what garnered that opinion piece. And Matt Strauss is responding to this as well. It's the link to the report or to the publication is in Matt Strauss's tweet. And he quotes it. He says, quote, "We conclude that lockdowns have an unacceptably high risk of negative side effects for children. Modeled theoretical benefits of an unproven policy suite were put ahead of actual observable harms." So we knew and know now how harmful these things are. I hope that we don't go down that pathway again, but it doesn't seem that it is likely, or it doesn't seem that people won't try to go down that road again. It doesn't, there's no guarantees. And even though we had the data about masking too. Nobody cared. Nobody wanted to see it. People said you're spreading misinformation. You don't know the up-to-date science, blah, 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 all sorts of stuff. It didn't matter. And people were allowed to get away with mandating these things anyway, despite the fact that they didn't do anything to help anybody. Here's Dr. Hodgkinson. Hodgkinson. I think I got it right. And he's talking about when the scales come off, and when the truth is known, people will be very upset. And I don't know that people want that trauma. I don't know that people will go through that trauma. I think that people will just say, well, we did what we had to do, and now we're past it. And, they didn't lie, they just didn't know, or something to that effect. They're not going to face what happened. I don't think, because what happened is so traumatic. That's my opinion. But it's not shared with Dr. Hodgkinson. Here we go.
When the truth is out from the basement printing press, little booklets, bullet formats, lay language, when the general population becomes aware of the extent, the massive, massive consequences of what's happened without any scientific support over a period of 2+ years, when the general public starts realizing that, when children start dying, as they will now, from myocarditis and other conditions, when the general public becomes sensitized to the reality of what happened, as opposed to the unopposed narrative they've been fed for 2 years, there will be a revulsion that I don't think we're yet prepared for. And
my worry is that people will, if they look at it and if they get close to it, say, man, I wonder what could possibly have caused that. Oh, well, because I've seen it. I've seen people say, oh, man, Justin Bieber was one of them. And they said, oh, I wonder what those two are doing that's causing that neurological disorders. And I thought, wow, all right. Still in denial. Okay. Here's Alex Brenson. He says, Denmark just barred additional COVID jabs for most people under 50. Yes, you read that right. Denmark banning COVID jabs. Wonder why they do that. Those signals. If people under 50 don't get the jab, how will it work for the people over 50 who do? Holy smoke, right? Your jab protects me, my jab protects you. Yowza. Here is Ron DeSantis is sending illegal immigrants to Martha's Vineyard. There are people on the left who are saying this is a political attack. Do they understand how insane that sounds? How the idea of flooding a country with non-citizens is itself an attack. And so sending those non-citizens, that bureaucrats and people who are in Martha's Vineyard to Martha's Vineyard, is a response to the attack? Maybe. I mean, I guess it could be classified as an attack, I suppose. But I thought that's an interesting take. But again, it's the same MO as taking an argument, misrepresenting the argument, and then straw manning it, right? I think that's exactly what a straw man is. You take the argument, you misrepresent it, and then you attack the misrepresented argument, because you can't engage with the first one, I suppose, and you can't engage with the original argument, so you engage with one that you think you can win. It's a really interesting situation to live through. I don't necessarily enjoy the conflict or anything to that effect. I really don't. But I think it's interesting how when you think that you've got somebody dead to rights because their policy documents say so or whatever, instead of engaging with the argument of your policy says X, you've done Y in contravention of X, and we need to talk about that. Instead of engaging with that argument, they just won't. And then I think that that's interesting to watch in real time because it looks to be a winning strategy. They're using it effectively to change policy in a way that is harmful, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. There's things that people could do, but you need to be organized, and they have a response to if people are organizing too. So it seems very difficult to do something about it effectively. How's that? Let's not say that you can't do anything about it, but it seems for an individual person, if they wanted to take this on, if they wanted to have this discussion, that taking that on would be very, very difficult, and you would not have a high likelihood of success, right? And so why take it on? Why take on the headache, right? And that's part of the attack. That's part of it, because if they've convinced you not to fight, then they've won without doing anything. And you've just let them do it because you're like, it might be uncomfortable. It might be kind of a pain in the butt. Yeah, probably is going to be a pain in the butt, isn't it? Oh, well. These are the things we do, I guess. All right, that's enough out of me. That's what I think's happening. That's what I think is going on. I think that there's all sorts of examples of it. I think that anybody who pushes back is getting labeled with the other. And I think that they have plans, and they're using those plans. They've cut their teeth on 4 years of Trump, and they've got internet censorship bills rolling out, and they've got all sorts of ways to silence and undermine anybody who's trying to, like Mark Friesen or Maxime Bernier, or anybody who's trying to say, like, we used to have rules that governed this. There are still rules on the books that govern this, but nobody's listening to them, and we need to, and we should. And if we just listen to our founding documents of Canada, we would. Anybody who talks about that kind of stuff is treated in the same way. And the modus operandi works a treat. And so we're in a situation where you've got to do it. You've got to push back, or they've convinced you that it's not worth pushing back and you might as well roll over, right? And I'm not the rolling over type. That's enough out of me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out Speaking Moistly and all the other fun stuff I do. And have a wonderful, wonderful day.